before I talk about the whoops, I want to talk about my ND filter real quick. So it is on piroflip right now. You can buy it. And I'm going to tell you just real quick the settings that I use when I use this filter. It'll fit on any GoPro Session, GoPro Hero, whatever GoPro you have. You will need a TPU mount or some sort of a GoPro mount that will fit an ND filter in front of the GoPro. I use it with a Session 5 in this mount. This first batch of ND filters are a little bit thinner than I wanted them to be. They're about 1.2 millimeters thick instead of 1.8 millimeters thick. If I didn't tell you that, you probably wouldn't even notice. It fits in all the mounts the same. The filter is probably best used on a GoPro. I mean, if you're a pro photographer or semi-pro, or you know about filters or photography, you're gonna already know what to do with this thing. I don't have to tell you anything. This is really more for everybody else. You don't really need to change any settings on your GoPro. Just use the stock standard settings. I recommend Super View because that generally just looks better. And I also recommend 2.7K 30 frames per second or 4K 60 on the Hero 7, which I think it does now in Super View as well. But I typically recommend the higher resolutions and the lower frame rates because it just looks prettier. After that, the settings that I apply to my video in post in Premiere are just a little bit of saturation. I fiddle with the brightness contrast a little bit, or not brightness contrast, I fiddle with the shadow and highlight filter a little bit, and then I also fiddle with the levels just a little bit to get it where I want. That's really all I do, and then I hit render and out. So this filter is an ND16 filter. It looks really fantastic at the height of a day, like the super bright settings, either a snow setting, a beach setting, or just generally to noon, like 12 o'clock with the sun super high in the sky. It will act as more of a jello filter than anything else at those times in those super duper bright settings because it is such a dark filter. Everywhere else, up until when it starts getting to sunset or sunrise, it really does give you a lot of blur in your video and does make things look really nice. At sunset and sunrise, it does blur a little bit too much. So this filter can really be used a lot of the time. It's only at the sunset and the sunrise that I would actually prefer to have something like an ND4 filter, because you still need a little bit just to modulate the light a little bit, but I don't have that because it was already expensive enough making just this one filter, so I'm gonna just skip that for now. Maybe if this filter is really popular and people really want it, I'll include an ND4. For now, the TBS Jello Guard comes in ND2, 4, and 8, I believe, and that is pretty good as well. This is just an ND16 because I felt like we really needed an ND16. Next, I want to show you this thing. This is surprisingly cool. Sergio just saw this and ordered a bunch of them to sell because it was just so awesome, and he had to have them in his shop. So this is a prop tool. It is not a ratchet wrench. It is a one-way bearing, and I haven't really seen this in many places, but it doesn't have, as you can hear, there's no ratcheting to it. It has an infinite number of locations that it is a one-way bearing, and this makes it a lot easier to unscrew and screw on a prop because there is no amount of like ratchet that you need to go through, and it also is a bearing, so it's much looser than a ratchet. So even when the nut doesn't have a whole lot of friction on it, you can tighten it and untighten it very easily, and it's just really convenient to use. Anyways, we might consider using the one-way bearings for other products because we never realized how great they were. All right, let's move on to some of these little whoops. So I've finally got the beta whoops. These are both 2S whoops, and then the 1S whoops here from Banggood, which I've had like a couple of. So before I talk about the 2S ones, let's talk about these 1S ones. So I've had like 4 or 5 of these things already. The US and the UR ones that I had, I gave away to some friends that wanted them. But these are the 2 I have left. And one thing I would say right off the bat is that these are all using the Crazy Horse, Crazy Bee, Crazy Something F3 controller in there, which is an all-in-one board, has everything in one board. And I have to say, I have not had a single problem with this board. And in fact, I have plugged in the batteries backwards a couple times, and it just burns the wire off the board, and I just solder it back on. So I'm really impressed with how robust this board is, how good the signal is on the board. So if you wanted to use this board for like a custom build of your own, wouldn't be such a bad idea. So this is the Snappy 7 or Snapper 7, or whatever it's called. I replaced the frame with a beta frame. This is actually the Beta 1S75 frame, and it is a whole lot better with respect to durability, but I actually didn't get any performance benefit. It weighs 4 grams less than the carbon aluminum frame that the thing came with, but I feel like it may be because the blades actually sit inside the duct that is restricting the blade a little bit more from spinning, so there isn't really any performance benefit, or maybe 4 grams just isn't enough, or maybe the thing just doesn't have any power to give me any performance benefit. Anyways, it performs better because I don't have to bend it back every time I crash. So then I built like 2 of them actually. This is the Beowulf frame from Bang. I think it's Beowulf. I don't know what it is. It's the Banggood variant. I wanted to try these 2 frames just to see which one held up better. The Beowulf frame is actually like a gram lighter than the Beta frame, but it's made of harder plastic. So I did actually crack it here, whereas I don't think the Beta frame could break. I mean, it's too resiny for it to break, and it's so reinforced that I don't expect it to break. Moving on, this one I built with the Racer Star 22,000 0703 motors. It was 07? Yeah, it's 0703 motors. And they are a lot better than the Happy model. I think they're 17,000 kV motors. And it has just more performance overall. Yeah, you lose a couple of seconds of flight time, but it's just much better performance overall. Of the whoops that I've had, this one, of the 1S whoops that I've had, this one with these motors that are higher kV, is the best performing one that I've had. The throttle is much better. It's got a little bit more power. They don't have any power, but it's got a little bit more power, so it's a lot better to fly. I haven't gotten the quad blades yet for the 75 because I actually ordered a bunch, but I ordered the wrong size. I was supposed to order 40 millimeters. I ordered 31 millimeters, so they'll come at some point. But yeah, these 2 are great. So now let's talk about the 2S whoops. So these are both fantastic products. They're from Beta. Beta FPVs is well known by now. They make some really fantastic quality products, and that's very important because quality is always nice. We all like quality. But let's look at the construction of this 2S65 whoop first. So it uses 2 of the regular whoop batteries, and it has this little dongle that it links them together. It gives you a 2S battery. So it's nice that it uses the same like 2S batteries because you can still charge it with one of these travel chargers, which is very important to me because you don't need to carry around an actual charger. You can just plug in any LiPo in here, 2S to 6S, and you can plug your batteries in and charge the 6 of them in like 15, 20 minutes. So the 75 is a little bit different. It's much bigger, it's much more powerful, and it takes a proper 2S battery with an XT30 plug. So this is where the dilemma actually starts. I'm sure there's a reason they needed the XT30 plug because it's drawing so much power, but it's no longer transportable, and you have to kind of charge a whole bunch of batteries and take them with you if you want to like go places and fly around, which is annoying because you can't just charge them on the fly and go. All that being said, both of these are great quality. They're using larger motors. This is using 0802 motors, and this is using 1102 or 1103. I think it's 1103 motors. So they do have a lot more power, and it does seem like the 8 size motor for the smaller whoop is definitely more efficient, a lot more efficient, as well as the 8 size motor for a 75 size whoop. But the 11 size motor is just wicked powerful. Both of these things are so fast, it's dangerous to fly these. They're no longer whoops. They can like bump into people and not worry about anything. I mean, I flew this thing in the house and I rammed it into a wall. I wasn't even going that fast, I don't think, and it just destroyed the top of the thing already. It does come with spare ones, which is very nice, but you should take into consideration that these aren't really whoops anymore. They are really quick, and the larger one especially, it flies more like a 2.5 inch than an actual whoop. So because of that, I don't really consider them personally in the whoop category. I mean, you're welcome to. They're really good products, as in they perform fantastic, although the smaller one does get the motors get extremely hot, but they do perform incredibly well. I still wouldn't recommend them because, like I said, I don't consider them whoops, and also they're a little bit heavy for what they are, so when you are flying them, you kind of have to stay on the gas, and if you do let off the gas, like there's a point in the throttle where you either have like gas or you have no gas. Like you're either floating or you're not, or you're either going fast or you're not. You sort of have to treat the throttle as an on-off switch, kind of, and that's a little bit annoying. So you might need to use like a throttle expo or something to spread out that kind of hump of power in the middle. But regardless of any of this, even though I've got, you can build this one yourself, all the links are in the description below, and they're all great, I would say refrain from buying any more of these altogether. There are new whoops coming, and specifically one that's coming this Friday, which I've been flying a lot, and it's amazing. I think it's a really amazing product. It definitely has the potential to be a phenomenal holiday product. And so yeah, so that's about the whoops. Sorry I don't have any flight footage from the 2S quads. I just haven't had time to fly at all. And the 2S battery that I have for the 75, it actually, one of the cells just died randomly after one flight, so I can't even use that anymore. Let's move on to this real quick. And I'm not necessarily showing you the quad. The flight controller inside is what I actually want to show you, which I'm going to put a picture of on the screen now. So this is the Helio 20x20 flight controller. And the main reason why I haven't previously tested the Helio products is because the day that the Hyperlight F4 OSD, the update to the Hyperlight F4, came out was the day I stopped using 30x30 flight controllers, which is funny enough because I was testing them before. And that's because the Talon F4 was launched at the same time as the Hyperlight board. They're both pretty much the same board. They just, the Helio Nation just shrunk it down into a 20x20 and just crammed everything on the board. And that's what I've been using on my frames, because in my last video I discussed why I build my frames, why I do. But anyways, that's what I've been using, and they didn't have a 20x20 option, and I really didn't believe that there's a possibility that it could be all that much better, because freaking Betaflight flies amazing. I mean, all of the firmwares that are out right now fly so incredible. How much better could the Helio board possibly be? So they finally made a 20x20 board, and they sent me a prototype. There's like only 6 of these in existence, and I really appreciate that they sent it to me for testing. And something I got to say about Helio is, so when Butterfly came out, Kalen did help them kind of get off the ground and get like the Kalman filter running, and Kalen also made Betaflight aware of what he was doing and how he was doing it, and that's when Betaflight really did improve tremendously. It became a lot more like Raceflight. People started flying and they're like, oh, this is the same as Raceflight. And then he kind of left the scene in terms of flight controllers. He started working on Helio, and they had a product that was already in the works. And so what Helio is, it's a totally separate entity. They have nothing to do with flight control. They don't care about flight controllers. They're just working on filtering technology and their specific filtering algorithm for their independent filtering system. So what's special about the Helio flight controllers is that they have 2 processors. They have an F3 and an F4, and the F3 is just for filtering and nothing else. It's like the flight code can't even access the F3, and the F4 is off doing whatever it does for the flight control firmware or whatever anybody wants it to do. So the reason why Helio is not really interested, well, they're not interested, but they're not crazy about making flight controllers, is because they're looking at a much larger industry spectrum. Unfortunately, FPV is a very small spectrum of industry, and so it doesn't actually have a whole lot of money in it. So if you are trying to build a company, it's not really that effective. Yeah, sure, 1 or 2 people can make a nice amount of money and a good living off, selling these things, but for the most part, it's a small industry. So they're looking at a much more broad spectrum industry, and they're just using kind of FPV as a proof of function, like proof of work, like proof that what they're doing is working and it is applicable to any application. So that may be why I think their board layouts are so awful, because they don't make flight controllers, they just work on their code. I mean, it's just my opinion, but honestly, their layout of the board is just so awful. I just don't like it. I just don't like the layout of their boards. If you like it, I don't know why you like it. I think it's one of the worst layouts of any board I've ever seen, but let's move on from there. So how does it perform? Is it actually worth it? So let's discuss if it is actually worth it. Now, I'm not necessarily for or against any of this Helio stuff or anything about what they're doing, but I will explain to you what I felt and my experience. So I have been talking to people that have used the Helio products over the past year or whenever they started doing this, and they have, for the most part, had really positive experiences. So when I threw it in this quad, it was already flying fine before on Betaflight, but then I threw it on the quad and it flew slightly better. I wouldn't necessarily notice the difference if you didn't tell me that it was a different flight controller. Now, it's running Betaflight. It's not running Butterflight. Like I said, Helio is not necessarily a flight control software. It's just the filtering system. And the way it works is that it takes the gyro information, filters it, and then feeds it into the flight code, and then the flight code doesn't have to deal with any filtering at all. In fact, when they compiled the Betaflight firmware, they just removed all the filtering stuff out of the code before compiling it for their flight controller. So it's not even there. You can turn it on, you can do whatever you want. It's not there. And it works well, it works remarkably well. And so where is it actually useful? Where is it actually helpful? Where it's helpful is that this is supposed to give you a more consistent experience. As in, if you build 5 of the same quad, it's very likely that 3 out of those 5 are going to have weird, annoying vibration problems. Even in today's day, with all of the incredible flight code and all the filtering and Betaflight and everything, we still get some prop wash here and there based on the conditions, the weather, how cold it is, how hot it is, what altitude level you're at, if it's foggy, if it's a little bit moist in the air. Like, all of this stuff impacts the way our quads fly. We may not realize it so much because the code has gotten so good, but it does. And if you're doing like a professional job and you need your quad to perform really well, it's annoying when it doesn't, and you have to sit there fiddling with settings to try and get it to work well. So what I did to try and test this was, I actually took this quad and I just messed with all the PIDs. I turned my Ps up to 150 and then I dropped them to like 5 or 10, and I saw if I could find any prop wash. And that's kind of the amazing thing. Even though if you try to do it on any other quad in a normal setting, or where you've tuned it, or where it's nicely tuned for the weather, because I don't know if anybody really tunes anymore. When we usually tune to remove prop wash entirely, and then we tune for feel. I mean, prop wash is the most annoying thing. We want to get rid of it. And one of the reasons why prop wash even exists is because of filtering itself. So the filtering, it actually delays the information getting to the flight code. This is beyond my knowledge. I'm just explaining what somebody else has explained to me, and it's just a basic understanding of it, sort of. I think I have a basic understanding of it. Anyways, the filtering, it actually delays the information getting to the flight code. So by the time it gets to the flight code, it's delayed and it can't compensate for what's been happening. And that's part of the reason why we get this flutter, prop washy kind of effect, this wobble in the air. It's not entirely because of actual prop wash. Actual prop wash is something sort of different. If you like look it up on Wikipedia or something, it's just a rapidly changing environment that you need a very fast system to compensate with. So all this 32K, 16K, all this stuff may or may not improve it, we don't know. But what does improve it is accurate filtering and faster filtering to get it into the flight code. So anyways, what I wanted to explain was that the benefit of this Helio board for now is that it should give you more consistent performance, and that is what I'm hearing from a number of people that I talk to. They say they put it in quads that are, wobbly vibration mess, or they've broken props, or this and that. And I actually did bend up some props and test it, and it did perform remarkably well. So it is working, and it's nice to know that it is actually doing what they claim it will do. Now, this isn't the only flight controller that is unique in what it does. There is another board from Brain, and Brain is well known now. They make a flight controller. They use a very specific gyro that's apparently updated or better than all the other gyros and other flight controllers. And they also have a sort of gyro management system that they have programmed themselves built into the board. And I, again, hear many good things about this board from many people, but I, again, have not tried it because they don't have a 20x20 version. Now, I don't know if they've announced it yet, but they are supposed to send me a 20x20 prototype board for testing so I can see how it actually is. But again, flight code has gotten so darn good. I struggle to feel a difference between any new technology or any new firm. I mean, Betaflight flies awesome. It flies really, really awesome. Like, it really flies well. It's hard to tell the difference between this stuff. So it's hard to say if one is better than the other or one is not better than the other. But what I can tell you is that the Helio stuff seems to work. It seems to be more consistent. And I'm looking forward to testing the Brain stuff. Stay tuned for this Friday, because what's coming is really, really cool. And you're probably going to want it. Anyways, thanks for watching. Big plus.